All right, everybody, today I'm going to do a quick setting on crown molding here, and I'm going to show you how to cut it in the nested position. Now, this is going to be a relatively simple setup, and this segment is going to give you a lot of info. So make sure that if you miss anything, you go back and you can, replay the video. You can scrub back and forth to, you can, play parts over that you think you might have missed. And I'm going to show you my setup, and for the most part, there's a lot of miter saws out there that they do the same thing, but they don't have the same features as the Kapex. So I'm going to go over what I have as a setup, but keep in mind that prior to this setup, about a year ago, I had a DeWalt that had crown stops, and they were okay. I'm going to show you a technique with a spoil board, as it were called, if you don't have crown stops. I'll show you how to set that up. All right, let's get in a little closer, and I'll explain everything. Before we go any further with a miter saw, first thing you need to do is know your setting of what you're setting up for the crown molding. I have this giant frame that I built, and it needs a dust cap, and the dust cap is not cut to size right now, but it is going to be up against the top like that. So this is going to give me my stopping point for the crown. So what I did was I put these bench dogs here in the MFD, and so what I'm going to do is butt that up against there. This way I can force this up against the piece so that I know I'm making good contact, so that just so I can rest the crown in the position that I need to mark it off. So the crown is going to be sitting just like this. Now I'm not taking any guesswork here, so that's why I'm putting this board where it's got to go. So this way I can press the crown up against it just like this, make sure I'm sitting exactly where I need to be sitting. And if you see it's not sitting right, I need to rock it until I get it perfect, just like that, where the seam comes together without any distortion or any gaps at all. So that's the first thing. So once I know that I have this completely perfect here, I can look down the bottom, and I also have that perfect there at the bottom. And if I didn't, I could rock it just a little bit, and right there, that's the spot. So now I hold it in this position here, and I'm going to mark off the edges of where I need to cut. That's how I'm going to set up for this long piece. Then for the short pieces, what I'll do is I'll run them up in a vertical position, mark them off, and cut them again. Then we're going to pre-assemble the whole thing to slide it on in place after we attach the dust cap. Okay, so on my particular miter saw, I have what are known as crown stops. And these crown stops, you can see how they slide in and out. These store on board underneath this UG stand for the Festool Kapex. And what I like about these most is that I can take the crown, I'm cutting it in what's called the nested position. Now, the nested position is the crown upside down. So this detail goes towards the bottom. This would be the ceiling. So your fence would be relative to what your wall would be, and the base of the miter saw would be your ceiling. So that's why I'm saying it's upside down. So the first thing I'm going to do is rock it in place here, because I want to make sure that I'm perfect all around, because I want my crown to sit perfect towards the bottom and also no variations at the top. So once I get into my position, I'm going to rock it back and forth here. Now take in mind there, we're not cutting anything yet. We're just getting the perfect position of where we want this to sit. See right there, seamless. That's what I'm really happy with that. So now, move this in, tighten it up. Okay, that's not going to move. Come to the other side. I'm going to repeat the process, but first I want to make sure that I'm keeping my crown in the position where I want it. So now when I remove the crown, I need to make a cut. I drop it back in. It's in the perfect position of where I want it, and I can even use a clamp to make my cuts without holding the crown. That'll really hold it into position. So before we get started any further with making the cuts, I also like to take what's known as a spoil board and butt it right up against the piece. So I'm going to clamp this in place right from the bottom right to the stand right here, and it won't be in the way at all. Okay, I got that piece in place. Come to the other side here. Okay, so now that I have everything in place, it's clamped down, and we're ready to cut. I'm just going to remove this now because I'm going to cut my spoil board. Okay, so all I need to do is drop the saw down. Then move to a 45. And as you can see, nothing moves. Now we'll start to cut the crown. Now the easiest way to do this is to first put the crown in position and cut your outside 45 to one end. Now the reason I made these pre-cuts here is so that when I swing it to 45, not only do I know I'm lined up, and I don't have to look at the gauge underneath anymore because my laser goes right into that line, but I can also see where I can cut on the bottom edge to the outside of the molding, because I want to get this as far possible to the edge so I don't waste any material. So I'm going to first cut at 45 on the end joint. And now, without having to measure, I'll butt this up against my dust cap. I'm going to bring this all the way to the edge, making sure that my outside corner is going to be completely where it needs to sit. Now, I'll just walk myself down to the other end, making sure it doesn't move. Now I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to mark right here on the edge. Now take note that I'm marking the bottom because it's going to be cut upside down in the saw. And then I'll just make a little tick mark out this way so I know I have to swing the saw to the other direction. Okay, so I'm bringing my crown back over to the saw, and what I'm doing is putting it in position, getting close to my laser line. I'm not going to cut right away. We'll swing the saw to 45. I'm going to leave it at a 90, and I'm going to bring my blade down to the material to where it's going to cut. I want to see where that tooth is going to cut. I want it right there. That's exactly where I want to cut. So now I just hold it in position, and because it's on this side, I have to move the clamp over because when you swing it to 45, it could interfere with this quick adjustment here. So now that I have it where I want, I'll verify again, and that's exactly where I want to cut. Now the saw cuts on a 45 on the same axis it does on the 90, if your saw's set up correctly. Now I'm going to swing it to 45. Again, you feel the positive detent there, but also I'm lining up my laser. I'll just verify again, see nothing moved. That's exactly where I want it to cut, and now I can just make the cut. And now I'll try to get the camera to focus, but you can see it may get drowned out a little bit. Let me see if I can back it up. My pencil mark is right there, and that's exactly where the 45 cut landed. So it takes the guesswork out of chopping down a little bit, moving it over, chopping down, moving it over. Some people do that. I feel like you waste a lot of time and material that way. Zero the saw out. And now I'm just going to drop it down and cut a 90 here so that I can start to measure up for my side pieces. Now for this side here, I cut my 90, so now I can rest it flat on the table in the orientation I need it to be, which is right there. And then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to scribe a line along the back. That's where I need to cut my 45. So I'm going to transfer that to the top of the, or rather the bottom. I'll transfer it to the bottom so that I can see where I need to cut, and then I'm just going to put a little tick mark that that's got to be an outside corner. You gotta remember, you gotta cut to the outside of that line. One second. Verify where I'm cutting. Okay, so back over at the workpiece here. Now, I'm not concerned so much about hitting the top as much as I am right now as getting the joint together and seeing if there's anything that needs to be trimmed. And that right there is perfect. I'll pre-assemble that. Okay, so just for a test fit, I've pre-assembled the crown molding with miter spring clamps that holds it in place. And now what I'm going to do is just bring it to the line where it's going to sit. I have a spacer block here. You'll notice it's two separate pieces, and that's so that I don't take away from the 50mm thickness of the frame itself. So that is just going to sit right over. It's a nice snug fit. I'm going to just bring it to the line there and bring it to the line over there so that I'm even. And you can see everything is perfect all the way around. Down here, I'm also flush with the back, which means that when this sits up against the wall, this whole side up to the crown is all going to sit flush to the wall perfectly, and everything is going to be just the way I want it to. Now, normally I like to use quick and thick on this, but all out of that. CA glue is just a temporary hold. You can add some of it, but the glue itself will be the longest bond that you can get. Just gonna coat it nice. Don't want too much squeeze out here, but the beauty of pre-staining it is because this is pine. If you don't pre-stain it, then the glue will soak into the pine itself and it will stain it, and then when you go to put the actual color on, dye, stain, whatever you're going to use, you will see that white spot of where the glue was. So I'm going to try to avoid that as much as possible by using a nice oil-based stain which penetrated into the wood. Now I'm just going to drive a couple of 3/4 inch pins into the corners here, making sure I stay in the solid part. One there, one there, perfect. So this crown is really twisted, so I am going to add a little bit of glue, and you can see here I have my build-up, or this is kind of like squash blocks here, and that's to raise that up so that I have the crown sit all the way up there and expose the frame so that I have that even reveal. So you can see the crown is really twisted. Now everything was cut perfectly, but being that it's really warped over there, and that's the real problem with working with the solid wood crown, is that you really have a hard time manipulating it. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of glue, and then I'm going to start nailing it off from this side first, because this is the better side. And as I nail it off, I'm going to move down the line here and start to work it against the piece where I need to nail it off so that everything comes out perfect. Now I used the same method for the cold molding that goes on the bottom, and you can see that fits just perfect right there. So I'm switching to a pin nailer. I'm going to apply some glue, and I'm going to nail that off, and then I go back and fill all the holes. All right, everybody, so that wraps this up. This turned out great. I still have to spray 3 coats of finish on this clear coat, but I want to let this set up a little bit with the glue, and then I'm going to pull off the miter spring clamps at least 3 hours, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill all the rest of these nail holes in the crown with a matching golden oak wood filler. So this way I can touch it up a little bit, or I might even use a wax stick. Those work well also to fill the nail holes. So thanks for joining me in the shop again. I hope you guys learned something here. I hope you got something out of this video with the crown stops. There are different saws that have different setups for the crown stops, but you can also use the spoil board there if you clamp it in place. So just make sure that you're setting your spring angle in the saw the correct way so that everything is touching perfectly on the base. And the most important thing is the bottom of the crown, since it's going to be upside down, is up against that miter saw fence flat. You want that to be perfect. You can set up your spoil board or your crown stops and lock it in place, and then you can make your cuts, and then you will get perfect outside miters. You'll also get perfect inside miters as well, but in this case we didn't need inside miters, so today we worked on outside miters. But the gist of it was really to show you how to use the crown stops to make sure that you nest and cut your crown perfectly. All right guys, thanks for joining me again. Check the description for the links below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and also hit the picture of a notification bell. That's going to notify you every time I upload a new video. All right guys, I got to get spraying on this, so I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me.